Hey, I'm ready to start. Welcome, Amiee Wyatt. Behave yourself. This is our interview of Amiee Wyatt. Board members have all been somewhat introduced as well, and the way this will work is each of us will ask a question one round and then another round of questions, and then we'll do a little follow-up as well if we have time to do that before we break. And I'm going to start with just giving you an opportunity to tell us, we've seen your resume, very impressive. Even the teachers had read your resume. She's had a really busy day, lots of answers to questions, and some tough and some easy. So tell us something that we don't know, that's not in your resume.
So, and first of all, I want to thank everyone. I have had a fantastic day. Everyone has been extremely welcoming and informative, and had a good time. Had a couple of great chauffeurs and tours. It's been really nice. So I think starting out, to not be repetitive to what people have asked me before, one of the things that I'm most proud of that maybe doesn't come through in my resume is just my vast experience in multiple areas. So one of the things in education we know of is we can't predict what comes next. And I've been in several situations in my career where I've been on a new frontier and I've had to embark on a new journey. So I think in many ways, like for my work that I've done with Lipscomb, I've invented new courses, new curricula. We're creating new programs. Same with my work with SREB. I'm in a different school with a different environment and a different background, always problem solving and trying to help facilitate and generate new ideas for a district. So I think that's one thing that maybe you can't get just by the experience, that I have all of these different levels of experience, but I bring with it a sense of openness to new ideas, innovation. I have a never quit attitude. If one door is closed, I look for another way to do something. I'm not afraid of making hard decisions when we need to. And I think because of the experiences that I've had, I'm really able to see issues from multiple viewpoints and be inclusive of other people in making those decisions. So the bottom line is that I want you guys to know that I'm tested, I'm proven, and I'm ready to lead on day one. And that's where I feel I bring a really good sense of direction and confidence that we can move forward.
Thank you for being here, Dr. Wyatt. If you could you describe your process for developing a successful team at the district and the school levels that is student-centered? And could you include in that how, what exactly your plans would be for recruiting and for promoting and retaining employees in the district and at the school level?
All right, just so I clarify, the first part of the question was about teams, and the second part was about recruitment and retention? Okay, thank you, making sure I got that. Okay, so with regards to teaming, I've never quite understood how we don't work more in teams. We know, coaches know, athletic coaches know, there's no I in team, we're better as a team. It's been proven. So we really need to work in teaming situations around the school, whether it's subject level, grade level. All of our schools need to be operating on a variety of different teams. It could be about our special populations. It could be for a different reason. But regardless of the type of teams we have, what we need to work on is creating a sense of norms and professionalism and action-oriented teams. So, in other words, how do we set up collaborative systems where all voices are heard in a team, and where we understand that we're not meeting to meet, but we're actually going to have a goal and we're going to measure that goal, and each time we come back to that meeting, we're going to see our progress and evaluate where we are. So it's the forward movement of teaming that I think is very important. We can really look to say we're teaming. You know, right now everyone's into these professional learning communities, and PLCs are a real big buzzword, but we've lost some of the intent of what that means and how we look at student work and how we make decisions in that work. So I think we've got to really come back to that and make it about the student. Whatever the purpose or the common goal of the team is, it always comes back to the student, and are we measuring what we're doing. The second part of that, with regards to recruitment and retention, I have been working tirelessly with districts on becoming their own education provider programs. That's something that I have some experience in, is helping train teachers and work with post-secondary partners to provide that certification process along with the coaching for retention. And we've had some pretty exceptional work in the districts that I've worked with this. We've had upwards of 90% of teachers retained, going from 60 to 90% of new teachers. And what I attribute that to is having not only a plan for recruiting, but it's about, they will come if they know what's here when they stay here. It's all about word of mouth, and it's about going through and hiring the best through what teachers have been given as far as support when they get here. So having a coaching model, having that understanding of that, welcome to Maury County, here you go, here's your classroom. No, we're with you, and we're going to have a collaborative group that works with you, and you're going to have coaching, and you're going to have support so that you want to be here, as well as understanding and respecting our teachers as professionals, and changing that culture. And there's a lot of different things that we can do deliberately and purposefully to address those cultural needs to retain the high-quality instructional leaders that we need.
Can I ask you one follow-up on that? Since you mentioned support for teachers, what exactly do you envision as support for teachers? What all is included as a part of that?
So what I find when we're talking about with teachers is that teachers want more time, right? They want that time to actually, it comes down to quality versus quantity. And we need some time. I have seen teachers do more in 40 minutes that's more impactful than having students an hour and a half. But how much time do they have to collaboratively plan that lesson and build in those higher order questioning techniques and build in those writing elements and those strategies that they need? So I think we need to invest a little more time in how we help teachers plan, and provide those insightful resources for them. So there's a lot of different models on how we can provide that, but making sure that they have communities of collaboration, no matter what level, if they're a brand new teacher or they've been in the district 20 years, that we have different ways that they can get support throughout the system.
Thanks for joining us, Dr. Wyatt. On this question right here, how have you used planning and goal setting to improve your school or system?
So strategic planning is a real area that we need to spend time to do this, and we need to be inclusive of all groups. We need to go through a consensus building process. So what I've done in the past is actually bring people to the table, have them brainstorm, throw out ideas, have us come to a consensus around priorities, and develop a strategic plan that has both long-term and short-term goals in that. And specifically from those goals, we set up action steps for different people that are responsible for making sure those action steps happen, and then we meet on a regular basis so that we get feedback on where they are. So we've gone so far as to actually even look at those action steps and say, okay, is it green, is it red, where is it? Like, we color code those steps. We say, does it need to go back to discussion? You know, do we need to send it back to a committee for discussion? Is there a task force we need to put together to help it out? Or are we moving forward ahead of schedule on this? So it's really following that plan, making sure that the resources are aligned to the plan, to the goal, and that we've come back through and we've evaluated and inspected what we expect.
In your administration, what avenues are open for you to listen to the concerns of employees, the students, parents, and the community?
I really would like to see, even if it's not established already, a system of advisory councils. So there's a teacher advisory, there's a parent advisory, there's a student advisory, and those meet at regular intervals to discuss, you know, issues that need. We can, and it's a two-way communication. We can bring things to them to get feedback, and they can bring things to that committee. So really having those types of advisory councils, as well as community steering committees. So, you know, utilizing the chamber and those partnerships and getting input around issues, and encouraging schools to have their own types of advisory committees, because we've got to make sure that we have a way of communicating around the strategic plan and around the issues that are important. Second to that, a little less formal, I think you need some informal ways. Coffee talks, town halls, things that people maybe that won't be on an advisory committee, but have that time to come in and express their issues and what's going on. I think any time that you try to hit it head on and get out there and say, what is it, and have those transparent communications, rather than, you know, not wanting to do that. I've worked a lot with building programs, student leadership programs. I did a United Nations program for students that didn't have English as their first language, so that we could work with them as well to get their feedback. I've worked with parent groups, very specific of diverse community groups, to get feedback in that way, and we've had kind of not just feedback meetings, but also how do we educate and demonstrate what we have to offer their students. So I think there's going to be a tiered approach to the different levels of groups, as well as the type of input we're seeking in those different groups, and the type of feedback of what we're asking them to provide, or free forums.
And then the follow-up part to that question is, how would you plan to have time available for all of those persons involved, all the committees involved?
So typically with an advisory committee, there's somebody that is kind of a co-chair, where it's a central office person and a non-central office. So, for example, if we have a teacher advisory committee, then somebody in the central office would chair that with a co-chair of a teacher that's on there. So we kind of work that way. So those are things that my direct reports would report on to me in our staff meetings, how those are being held. Whereas I would make time for coffee talks, town halls. We would have regularly scheduled meetings where I'm available to people in our calendar.
Thank you.
Sure.
Good evening. With Maury County Schools having such a diverse population, as you saw, we have rural, city, rapid growth. What would you do to make sure that all of those different needs are met for the kids?
Well, at the end of the day, we're one school system, and I think what we need to say is everybody has their wants, their needs, their pride of their community, and we need to make sure that everybody gets heard and respected on that. But we also need to make sure that everyone is getting the attention they need to the programs that are giving them the most success. So I think what I would say to that is really listening to what each community has to say in a variety of different ways, through different avenues, whether it be through board members, whether it be through commissioner members, through all types of outlets to hear that. The second part of that is we have to make sure that it's not a one-size-fits-all in programs that we do, that there is some creativity allowed for the different communities to be able to express themselves. So while we would hold the same high expectations for one school as we do another school, that they have to allow to be able to achieve those goals in their way that works for them, because it's not going to work the same at every school.
Good evening, Dr. Wyatt.
Hi.
So, what are the reasons that you want to leave your current position and come to lead Maury County Public Schools?
Great question. So this one's I don't mean to be comical, but sometimes we need a little comic relief. So the job I currently have, which I absolutely adore, was always my retirement gig. So it was something I always had an interest in doing, but I wasn't ready to leave schools. So I adore working in schools. I adore working with students. I really enjoy working with teachers and growing leaders and working with principals. So it's not about leaving my current position. I actually love it. It was a little before the time that I actually wanted to have that job. I wasn't finished my work, so to speak, with helping to build my own team and watch that team identify goals and succeed in those goals. I really feel ownership in that piece, and I want to be a part of something that right now I'm helping a lot of people and I'm giving a lot of great advice, but I still want to create and be a part of a team that does the heavy lifting and the work.
Okay. Well, thank you, ma'am, for coming to see us. Appreciate it. And my question is, would you describe a significant change that you've initiated in your current role and use what evidence, and tell us what evidence you have to show that it was a positive change? Mm-hmm. And how did you build support for that change?
Sure. So I worked with an urban district recently, and one of the challenges to this type of change is being on the outside and coming into a district and saying, hey, I need you to do this. I mean, it's very difficult because a lot of times you don't have the buy-in and the trust already there as an outside person. So I worked with an urban district recently to develop a 3-year strategic plan around college and career readiness. And the best way I can put it is the district itself was in a dysfunctional situation where people weren't talking to each other. And so one of the things that I worked on is really understanding who had to be at the table, how we had to get input. So I worked with the district to show them how we put this together and who needed to be at the table and have those conversations. The end result was that we developed a 3-year strategic plan that not only addressed high school students' career and college readiness, but it was a K-12 plan, so we had actually informed decisions at elementary and middle school of some of the career exploration that need to happen. And we built in benchmarks for each year of what the measurable goals were going to be to measure for success. And year 1 was to increase the number of industry certifications and to increase the number of students achieving a college credit. We set up a series of meetings with different community groups, with different school groups, principals, counselors. We did some legwork there to communicate how we were going to do this. And the end result was that district went from 300 industry certifications earned to 1,400 certifications earned in 1 year, and their achievement scores in their college credits went from, and I can't remember the exact number, but it went up from about 100 college credits earned to about 200 college credits earned. And that was just in the first year, and the reason that was how we wrote the goals, articulated the goals, and decided who was going to be in charge of making that happen and checking that in. So we set up some real rubrics and understanding of how those checks and balances were going to work, and they succeeded, and they're continuing to succeed. So I'm very proud of that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Again, thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you.
What are some of the steps you would take to ensure school funds are spent wisely and accounted for properly?
So I think when you're talking about budgetary funds, it can't be a secret. It has to be a transparent process. So we have to see that, number one, is our funding aligned to our district plan? Period. That's it. Are we prioritizing what we say our money is going to those priorities? Secondly, it has to keep on going. Are the individual school improvement plans aligned to that district plan as well, so that we can actually see that connection and ensure that the funding is spent correctly? Previously, I worked with principals in a collaborative effort where we had a process by which they went through their budget, where departments went through their budget. We assessed where we were at, and then we made those recommendations. But there was an evidence-based process where people had to say, I'm asking this because this is what it's aligned to, and this is how they would measure if they were successful or not. So I think clarifying that particular process so that we can actually give feedback on a regular basis and say, this is what was spent on this and this was the outcome. That's it. At the end of the day, it's like running my own household budget. I want to know what I spent it on and what I got for my money, and I think we've got to be able to do that clearly.
Thank you. I'll add to everybody else. Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Our board is dependent on the county commission to fund the budget. How would you propose gaining the support and trust of the county commission for that budget?
I think we need to first ensure the commission that the money follows the students. We need to understand the direct relationship of the money to the student. Sometimes it's hard for people to realize, because a lot of our money goes to salaries, it goes to all things, but it's the effect on students that we really want to articulate. The commission has a different channel of communication with those constituents, and I think we need to work with them and see what it is that they're valuing and how is what we're doing meeting those needs. We know that it is an economic imperative that our schools are successful. So we have to show commission that, just like we show business community partners, that return on investment. What is it that we're getting for what we're spending? I think we need to rebuild some trust as well. I think we need to spend some time in saying, okay, let's take small steps. Watch what we do with this. And let's start from there, and then move on from that. But we don't give up in asking, and we also show that we're trying to bring other funds to the table as well, that we're working on actively looking for grants and leveraging other types of partnerships, that it's not just ask, but what are we doing to meet the needs as well as the ask. So we have to regain that trust in some conversations with them, definitely.
Have you been successful in getting strong parental and community support for a school, program, or district? And could you tell us about one of those successes?
Sure. So I was a former principal of Antioch High School, and when I was principal of the school, I walked into it under state takeover. And I'll never forget, because someone told me that day, they said, I can't believe you're principal of that school. You know, it was that school. And I had never been in the school until my first day, and I walked in, and it was amazing. It was beautiful. I couldn't believe that people were talking about this school being so awful. So, I quickly realized that the parents and the community of the area were very supportive of the elementary schools. But after that, they were basically sending their children somewhere else because they weren't going to send those kids to that school. So, two things that I understood after talking to different community members was this. Number one, they had never been in my school. So they were forming perceptions based on never having seen it, just on word of mouth. And the second thing I realized was this was a very supportive community of the elementary schools, so how do I translate that to the high school? So over 3 years, I built a system of collaboration with the other principals in that community, and we created a community fair. And the concept that I had was all elementary parents come to see their students perform. They love to see their students perform. So the concept was we were going to have a showcase of performances from each of the elementary schools to get the elementary parents in the door. We had the TSU band perform. We had ROTC doing rock wall. We had jumbo things for the kids to play on. We fed them free. We had the health department there doing free flu shots and we had everything covered, whole child. And then as a little side, we had all of our offerings for the school. And the parents had to go through that to see their child perform. And when they started realizing, you offer this, you have this, you can do this, that changed things. We also created student ambassadors that talked very positively about our schools and the experiences they were having. After doing that, we had huge parent support of that school. We didn't even have a PTA when I started there. By the time I left, we had parents, we had full houses coming to open house, and I was just like, wow. But it's about breaking down some of those stereotypes and stigmas, and also being welcoming to people who didn't think they were welcome in there before. So that was one way we got parents involved. Sure.
What do you consider to be your major strengths that you would bring to this position?
I think one of the strengths that I have is I genuinely care. I genuinely care about students. I care about the people I work with, and I want what's best for the people I work with. And what's best may not be working with me. It may be what they want. It may be getting another job. It may be getting a promotion. But I actively work towards making sure people are in the position that they want to be in, that they're growing the way they want to grow, and that I'm looking at how we can always be better than the day before. That's kind of my goal is how can I be better? How can you be better? What is it that we can do together better? I think that's a huge strength that I bring. I have a never say die attitude. I don't quit. I push it. I push myself. And I have high expectations, but I don't just put it out there. I would never expect what I don't inspect, and I would never ask you to do something I wouldn't do myself. So I think those are the qualities that I lead with.
So what would be one mistake that you've made in your job, and how did you own that mistake, and what did you learn from that mistake that helped you to improve in your future job performance?
Really good. I mean, hey, there's two. I'm a firm believer in learning from failures. I mean, that's I learn more from my failures in life than I have from my successes. No, I'm just trying to think of probably the one. It was a while back, but I think it's the one that sticks with me the most, and so that's the one I'm going to share. I made a mistake early on in my career when I was an assistant principal of making an assumption that a parent wasn't actively involved with their child. I made an assumption that, they're not going to be involved, and they needed to be communicated with. And when that happened, I got an earful. Like, I had a lovely discussion with that person, and I was caught off guard, and I was shocked, and I couldn't believe I had done that, and that I had made that assumption that parent didn't need that communication. So over the course of the years, in my experience, I have really been true to sitting down with people, especially because most of the time when I sit down with people, they're not happy. I mean, that's just the fact of it. Usually somebody's upset about something. And I think what that's taught me is, first of all, everyone wants to be heard. Don't procrastinate with it. Don't put it off to deal with. Hear them. But don't be quick to make a decision. As educators, we come from this need, I think, sometimes to fix things, right? That we want to handle it. I tried to fix that problem really fast. And what I've learned is I don't need to fix the problem right now. I need to listen. And then once I listen, I can actually start thinking about, okay, what I now tell parents when I talk to them is, you will hear back from me in 24 hours, and I will let you know where we stand with this. And, maybe I need another 24 hours, but you will hear from me, and that's my commitment. And I have probably dealt with more issues effectively by kind of now taking on that new perspective of, they're passionate, they're mad, they need to get it off their chest. It's not at me personally, and it's their reality no matter what I feel about it, and I need to figure out and be very thoughtful of my response before I'm trying to jump to a defensive position or try to fix it or whatever. So I think I learned a lot about how to handle those difficult situations from that. Sure.
Think of a problem that was brought to you recently. What was the problem, and how did you handle it?
This one is extremely recent and very important for what's going on right now. So just recently, in my current work, part of the work I do is I manage lots of different contracts with different school districts as of right now. As you guys know, with everything that's happened over the last few months, school districts are calling right and left saying, I don't think we're going to be able to work with you next year, blah, blah, blah. So, our own business has had to apply for a small business loan just to try to figure out how we're getting through all of this. So the problem, not to say that the problem is COVID, but the problem is we're okay right now, but I'm thinking 6 months ahead. That's the problem is how can we continue to fulfill our mission in supporting schools when schools feel like they don't have the ability to do our work. So the first thing I did was I called a lot of the schools and involved them and said, okay, what are the things y'all are discussing about your needs? What are the things you're thinking about that you're going to need? I know you say you don't have the money for what we've been doing, but what is it that you think is going to need? And a lot of it had to do with support for teachers and how they're going to teach, either in a blended environment or a virtual environment, or understanding those new normals. And so after we heard that, I got together a group of instructional coaches at our organization virtually, and we brainstormed about, well, we're not a tech company, but how do we help in this new normal? And so we actually got all of the instructional coaches' ideas about how to create flexible lesson plans. And then I worked with the communications department, and we now have a brand new professional development plan ready to go to all school districts, because what we determined was yes, money will be short, but we still need to help teachers get through this. So we've got to have money designated to do that some way, somehow, and we're there to support it. So I think to answer that issue about when I see a problem is trying not to wait till the problem hits me, but seeing the problem and jumping ahead so that we have viable solutions no matter what comes forward.
How have you worked with the following groups to generate support for the schools? How have you worked with employees? How have you worked with businesses? How have you worked with diverse community groups? And how have you worked with media, those 4 groups, for generating support for schools?
So, on a couple of different levels, with employees, and let's start with this. So with employees it's really about the professional development of the employees and working with those diverse groups. So understanding that, do we have the training and knowledge, do we have the background understanding for working with students in a situation? Do we know anything about this situation? What is it? So thinking about it from a training need, whether it be a poverty training or an English language learner training or a transgender training, or what are those big topics that are happening when we're trying to work with diverse groups? I have been very fortunate in working with several programs that call attention to specific student populations. So, for example, Latino Achievers. I've worked with a leadership group, a Hispanic leadership group. I've worked with AVID and trying to get first-time college goers. We're actually a national AVID showcase site. So I have some experience in looking at meeting those needs and understanding what those needs are. I actually had a parent class where we fed the parents, and they came in the evenings of students whose parents didn't speak English. And each part of it was a kind of an education piece of what's happening in the school and what their student is doing, as well as a little English learning for them that they enjoyed. And so we kind of did some of those things. With regards to media, and I'm trying to think of my ideas with that. Your question was, didn't you include media in that? That's what I thought. With regards to media, I was a part of a targeted campaign to kind of redesign and reinvent schools in the district. And so we came up with actual kind of slogans and branding to target different groups. So to target a different demographic groups, different age groups, different communities, about what are those things that they saw. So I do have a little experience with using media outlets to kind of support our work, but also having good relationships with the media to make sure that we have great stories for them that they want to do in our schools, and providing those to them and kind of giving them updates on those really cool student interest stories of what's going on. So we highlight students as often as possible in those stories. Did I miss a group on that? I think I got a couple of them. Sorry, there was a group list. Apologize.
Business.
Oh, business. So, in working with business needs, and I shared this with the business community today at lunch, but I do have and want to continue the work that I've done in developing business partnerships in our schools, and really look at how they inform curriculum, not just, do they partner with the school? Gone is the day of bring donuts to the meeting, that's how I partner with the school. We actually want their insightfulness with regards to how we deliver curriculum and what students can really take away from experiences, those experiential learning experiences, field trips, job shadows, guest speakers, all of those things that make the curriculum come alive. And so I've been able to really look at partnership agreements. I've worked with post-secondary partners quite often on setting up programs in our schools where students can get scholarships, where they can get support for entering in other programs, teacher prep programs. I've worked a lot on that. So there's a couple of different varieties of post-secondary partners and business partners of partnerships that I've done.
What approach do you intend to take in communicating with the board if you are selected as superintendent?
So, communication is vital to the success of a board and to the superintendent's position. It's so important that we are seen as a unified front. My job is to promote and represent the board in the work that I do. So I feel that some of the things that I would want to do and continue to do is not only be a part of board retreats or any of those types of meetings that we have, but also have regularly scheduled individual lunch meetings where we talk about those concerns and those issues that are going on, and so that I have adequate time to do some research and bring some viable solutions or really work through assessing what the situation is so we can go deep into those. Obviously I would give you the weekly communications on status of projects, status of the strategic plan, where things are. So I think keeping that open and honest communication of what's going on, making sure that that you have hired me to deal with the day-to-day dealings and bring the expertise to the school, but that I am accountable to you in showing you the return on that investment. And that's what I really want to do.
So in your research of our district, can you name one area that you specifically think you could improve under your leadership?
So one area that I feel that I could definitely improve student achievement specifically at across the board with regards to literacy, but I really want to focus on middle schools. Because right now, middle school is where we know historically we lose parent involvement, we lose student interest, they make life decisions. But I really would I think something under my leadership is that I can really build in a system of having some non-negotiables of understanding when it comes to how we design our content delivery and how we promote a system of acceleration, a system of intervention, how we're looking at those different contexts at the middle school level. And I think that by really examining what we're doing and having benchmarks that we've created ourselves and looking at that we can show growth within that area. And I think that's something that I can definitely affect.
What evidence can you cite to demonstrate that you have the ability to work effectively with diverse students, population, and multicultural groups?
As someone who's worked in a diverse setting the majority of my career, and also right now what I do is I actually have to go every day I'm in a different state, I'm in a different city, I'm in a different population. I think that the experience I have is that I take the time to really understand where they're coming from before we jump to a solution-oriented process, but that I think what I understand from doing that is I have this experience of knowing that I can't just say, well, this is your solution and this is what's going to work for you. That it's really not. It's really coming to a collaborative understanding of what will work and not just trying to problem solve for a diverse group or a diverse community. For instance, I worked recently with a with a school district in Omaha. I did a needs assessment for 7 high schools and all of their programming. And each school is different. Each community was different for them. And so I'm not going to make recommendations as a one-size-fits-all. We actually tailored it. We actually looked at what the student focus group said, what the teacher focus group said, what the parent focus group said, and really said, well, this is what the data says, this is what the people say, and this is how we build on that. Because if you don't listen to diverse groups, it's like putting a square peg in a round hole. It's like trying to solve something that isn't necessarily a problem for them. So having those ways of meeting them where they are, and setting up opportunities for them to feel heard. I come back to this a lot. I think whether it's a student, whether it's a parent, whoever it is, they often perceive barriers to access, whether they're physically there or not. And so how do we make them feel welcome to share those ideas with us and provide those opportunities for them to give feedback? With regards to multicultural groups, really looking at what are those expectations that they have for their students? How do they differ from what we're used to, and how do we respect those differences, but make sure that the students are achieving at the level that they need to be achieving at? So, what are the things that they need to hold them accountable to that? I've worked with parents who feel, for example, I've worked with groups that were all Arabic speaking or all Hispanic speaking, and so we've had to really bring in people from the community that they respect and kind of earn their trust, because they didn't have trust in the educational system, and kind of explain to them what we were doing. And once we did that, I think we really gained their commitment to what we were trying to do.
How would you work with the board to be effective, to make good decisions, and be respected as a board and by the community?
So, one of those things that we need to do is, I think we need to make sure that we have to be respected, because we have to be able to show that we're one unit. In other words, when we are making decisions, there's not public instances of me saying something or somebody saying something, but that we are all committed to that. We can agree to disagree. It's going to happen. That's okay. That's consensus building. But once we build consensus, we have to respect that decision as a board. That's, I think, the best thing I can do to represent effectively and communicate effectively. I think also is having the respect of you all by making sure that I'm notifying you. For example, if there's a safety and security issue, you know as quickly as I know. So being that extension of you all, so that you don't feel like you're kept in the dark of something, because that's a trust issue. And I don't want to ever break that trust. So I want to make sure that we have clear norms of how we operate and what those expectations are, as we work towards that.
Describe how you have led a school or a system in creating a vision and building support to accomplish that vision.
So, creating a new vision is probably one of the hardest things a leader has to do, because most people in education at this point in time say, I've been there, done that. You know, you're going to make us create a new mission statement. You're going to make us create, they get lost in this process, and they kind of lose you halfway through. I think the important part of understanding the vision is, first of all, is it a shared vision? You know, if it's my vision, then why do you care what it is? So it has to be a shared vision that we've all agreed upon. We have to know that that's what we're trying to reach. I think really making sure that we communicate with people of why that is the vision. So, for example, what some of the work we did was develop profiles of a graduate, develop profiles of an 8th grader, and we vertically aligned some of that work with what we did. And we worked with teams of teachers to talk about why is that important? Are those particular characteristics important? And then what does it mean for our school? And then have them drill it down, what does it mean in your classroom? So really breaking down that vision to make it meaningful. The worst case scenario I see is when people talk about vision and mission is it's this great statement we have plastered everywhere, but nobody really knows what it's about. It's more important for me for people to internalize it and really understand. Our vision is that we're going to do this, this, and this. And this is what we're going to do well. We're not going to try to do everything a little okay. This is what we're about, and this is our focus. I know within about 5 seconds of walking in a building if they have a really good vision, because not only do I see it, but I hear it. People talk about it. I'll walk into a school, if teachers are talking about ACT prep, I know ACT is important. If I see the reading goal for the day, I know reading's important. So I think that is how you communicate a vision appropriately is do I understand it? Can I communicate what it looks like for me and what it looks like for my students? And then you've done a good job with it. Otherwise, it's just a poster.
Describe a situation related to your current job that demonstrates your ability to inspire and motivate people.
So, when I work with school districts right now, they ask for a service, they ask me to come in and support something, but then the next thing is, well, how do I do it? And so, inspiring people to act is probably one of the hardest things you can get done. So I recently worked with a school district in Kentucky where they wanted me to come in and help them design a new career academy model high school. This was what they were working on and how it would look and everything. And I had to help them see, motivate how they were going to start it. They've been talking about it for years. They hadn't started. And I think sometimes people need to be given permission to start. I know that sounds funny, but I think one of the things that I do is I say, you have permission to try. You have permission to start. If you don't start, we'll never start. And I think when you're motivating people is, number one, allowing themselves to try those things, to move forward, and to fail forward if necessary, and be okay with that. Say, okay, I tried this, I piloted it, it didn't quite work. How do we redo it? How do we adjust it, or do we not do it? And working through those things. You need to motivate people with 3 things, and I teach this in my class, and all my students who end up watching this will start laughing because they hear me say it all the time. You teach with your heart. You motivate with your heart. What is it that I feel is right? So I need to motivate you by you feeling good about it. You teach with your head. So you need to know it's the right thing, and I need to make sure that we're on the same page. And the last thing is I need to shape that environment. I need to change your surroundings to make it possible and get out of your way so you can do it. So that's how I help people is I say, okay, how do you see it? How does this add value to your life? How do you know this is the right thing? And what are the structures we needed to put in place to get you inspired to go? So that's how we work. Sure.
Well, you've heard about budget. Today we've had discussion about it. Explain how you would develop a school system budget, and tell us who you would involve and how would you involve them, and how would you pull the board into that?
So when you're looking at budget, the first place you start is assessing it. So we gotta assess what we're doing now. So you involve principals, you involve central office department heads, and we'll take a close look at what are we currently doing? What are we spending money on that's working? What are things maybe that aren't working as well? What is the most effective use of what we have? So we've got to look and involve them in groups around that and give them time to have those discussions. The second part of that is really looking at how are we currently using the funding equitably. Equal is not equitable. And so are we making the adjustments that we need to make where the greatest needs are? And we need to make sure, without robbing Peter to pay Paul, right? We're not going to give up something somewhere to get something somewhere, but we need to address that, are these students getting what they need in this budget that will make the most impact? So those are some of those areas that we need to identify in the current budget. The second part of assessing the budget is looking at the salary positions. The majority of a school budget or a district budget is salaries. And I want to hold people with high expectations about how we discuss that work. Behind every salary is a human being. And we need to be very real about how we talk about salary positions. Don't just say, well, red cut that. Right. No, we need to value our employees, and we need to talk about that sometimes we do need to reallocate something, or sometimes something needs to shift, but we need to make sure that it's not just a paper decision, that there's a humanistic part to that. The second part of after we assess what we're currently doing with regards to our budget is looking at the federal funded part of that budget. So making sure that our title, that our Perkins, that all of those different buckets are being used correctly within the guidelines. One of the interesting things is that many times, especially, for example, with Perkins money, they've opened up the guidelines. And so we need to address if we're actually using it to its full potential. A quick example of that is Perkins money can be used for general education teachers, not just CTE teachers, if it's about career exploration and furthering career goals. So are we using it to its full potential is sometimes what I wonder with the federal dollars. After we've addressed that we're using those correctly, I think we need to look at also, are we braiding funding correctly? Are we using different sources to make something work correctly? It's not just one line item, right? Like, we don't just fund this program from this bucket. Can that program be funded from multiple buckets? That's a good question. And is that the best way to support that? So have we looked at that braided funding? And we need to involve all of those different departments in that conversation. We then need to look at community resources. We need to involve people about how are we leveraging partnerships? What are things that exist out there? What are grant opportunities that we have out there? Do we have our eye on other ways that we can get supports? They could be monetary, they could be not monetary, but it could fulfill a need. So we need to look at those. So we need to involve some outside committees that really take a look at some of those other needs that we have. And then lastly, of course, making sure that school board members hear the rationale behind each of those decisions. In other words, this is what was asked for by the teachers. This is what was asked for by this particular department, or this, and why was it asked? So I think having rationale behind each of those things when we're formulating a budget is extremely important.
Well, thank you. We have just, a few minutes, and last night we were able to do just a little bit of follow-up. I don't know if any of you all have any follow-up questions for her before we break. I have one.
Okay.
I know from your resume that you turned a couple of pretty big schools around, Antioch and McGavock. Mm-hmm. And I think we'd like to hear how you did that.
Sure. Sure. So when I'm working at schools that have high poverty base, with students in high poverty, we know that the typical response nationally has been to throw more money at a school in poverty. Money helps, always helps. However, that's not necessarily the only experience that helps students, because if we continue to do the same actions with more money, we're not going to have a different outcome. We can't keep teaching it the same way. We have to do something different. So one of the things that I really did was work closely with different teacher groups and had these discussions about how do we help our students see these connections, these realities, what it is that we have to do. And what we really determined that the equalizing factor was not necessarily to, place more money in it, but was to have more experiences and context. That students that were in poverty situations could never visualize themselves as anything but. If I grow up being, around somebody who's always been in this particular career, that is my box. That's what I know. If I grow up around lawyers and doctors and whatever else, then I know what that potential is. For those of us who are in education, my mother never once told me I had to go to college. I knew I was going to college. It's an untold expectation from parents who understand that. So I think once I worked with the teacher groups to understand that we had to do things differently, that the definition of insanity was continuing to do the same thing and expecting different results, that all we could do was try to do something else. They were on board. They were willing to try to do something else. The second part of that was the support structures. We put, in both situations, I put teachers in teams. I made sure that we had collaborative planning time for those teams, and that they actually had purpose and they understood what those goals were that were aligned. So we continue to do that. I made sure that we recognized and highlighted and celebrated successes often. Teachers were always recognized for their work that they did in their teams, for achievement their students were getting. We really told them, there were days where I went to every classroom and gave a teacher an apple, or every day I gave them a candy bar. Same with the students, made them really feel ownership of those teams they belonged to. So we had a process of really working with and valuing that work that they belong to. The structures had to support. You heard me talk about that I have to address the structures in order for people to be able to do the work differently. So we worked up a new master schedule that the teachers could use to do the collaborative planning. We changed classes that teachers said, we really could use this and we could use this. So I did a lot of listening and making modifications. I'll never forget, the first tryout, the teacher said, well, we want this schedule. And I said, well, okay. And we tried it. And 2 months in, they were like, we hate it. I said, but you wanted it. And so I said, at semester, we can change it. But now, so I think I got some credibility with them that I was willing to listen. I was willing to try those things. But the bottom line that any teacher that ever worked with me in any of those buildings will tell you is that I always articulated what was best for students, and I never shied away from that. And number two, they always knew I was checking it. They knew anything that I said we were going to do, I followed up with it. I didn't let it go off my plate. And I wasn't going to put in rules that were never followed upon or anything like that. And the last thing I want to say about that is I built their capacity to lead. So when I left, the structure didn't move. That next year, it worked like I was still in the building. There was a new principal, and the teachers actually told that principal, this is the structure we work on. We're not changing. And so it was kind of interesting that it kind of took a life of its own. And so even all the teachers that we put in leadership positions, McGavick, my entire lead teacher team all became principals, every single one of them. So again, I go back to feeling the need to make you your best, and in return, it always pays it forward, and I do believe that. Anyone else? I shut it down. They're tired. Well, let's take a break. Okay. All right, thank you all so much, appreciate it, thank you.
We'll come back, here, and if there's anything, you can ask us questions. Okay, I'm gonna call the, meeting back to order, and, we apologize for us being so late, but, we want to give you an opportunity to ask us questions, if you have any questions. Yeah, or,
So, my questions are quite simple. I would love to hear from you all as to what you think are the greatest strengths and weaknesses of the school district at this time as you see it. So what are those things that you really think we can't lose, we wanna make sure we capture those things and we wanna maintain them? And what's that thing that you think is ultimately the one thing we have to focus on? So I'd love to hear, anybody who wants to take it. Or
we'll just go around, let each of us say something.
Sure.
I think one of the greatest strengths is our teachers, I do. And I think because they've had to be so residual. I mean, they've had to put up with a lot, and they're still here, and they're still, I know during the pandemic, just watching how the love they had for the kids and all that. And one of the things that I would hope would change, that our scores and the perception of the community about where we rank, and they judge that as being, as if we're bad. The teachers are bad, the board is bad, the whatever, and you know that's not the case. But I do think it's something that is a priority for us to be able to move the needle and show what our kids can do. And I'm concerned about literacy. I'm concerned about those kids that can't read. So I think that's a real priority too. So, Ms. Parker. Go ahead. Someone else. David had his thought.
David, you got a thought? I think Betty hit. What was the question again?
So, the question was your what you think is the greatest strength and the area for growth for the district that you wanna see addressed.
Okay. Just, for me, I think, as a county, we are ready to make some good moves. I think, overall, all of the schools, all of our citizens are really in a good place, ready to do something. And that's gonna, I think, to me, dovetails right into what our biggest need is some direction for that. A good, solid leader in a good place that can put us all on the same path and have us all pull in that direction and capitalize on where I think, everybody really wants to head to. So those two things kind of go hand in hand for me.
Actually, that's very similar to what I was going to say. However, I will say is, if you found out, we have a very unique and diverse community. You know, it's not just rural, it's not just urban. We do have high growth areas, you know, and in those rural areas and in all the areas, we have a strong sense of community. And it's not just the Maury County community. It's Hampshire, it's Mount Pleasant, it's Santa Fe, it's Culleoka, and those are all very strong communities. And just we are still one school, but they're all different. And you know, as you said before, you know, they're unique, and each of them has their own way to go. So.
I think our strength is the investment in our community with our businesses and stuff. I think they want to see our kids succeed. And I think one of our biggest challenges is that the culture of the whole county is changing. We're growing, and we are becoming more diverse. We're getting people moving in, and to I guess to be able to combine that with the old, culture and the new culture coming in. So I think that that's a real challenge for us.
I think one of our biggest strengths is like Ms. Kinzer said, is our teachers. They stuck with us throughout these last years and stuff, trying times with their pay, and they still stuck it in, and and still educating our kids, and to the best of our ability of what money we can give them. That says a lot right there about our teachers. I'd say one of our weaknesses right now is pretty much coming from state. Our testing. That's where we kind of get a bad rep, is because we can't get any kind of foundation on our testing. If we try to move into ACT style testing, that's kind of the way I'd like to lean towards. It's getting a good foundation for that, so we can start documenting things and getting moved in the right direction.
Anyone else? Question answered.
That was really about the what I wanted to make sure that what I saw and envisioned was also in alignment with what you all were seeing, and I agree with you. My favorite part of the day has been listening to teachers and seeing that commitment. So thank you all for reassuring me and validating that.
And they don't hold back.
No, that's okay. We wouldn't want it any
That's
other
right.
way.
I wouldn't want it any other way. That's right. Well, we will probably not meet till the 8th, and give a week for, let us to kind of soak all this weekend and recover and let you all go back to your world, and then we'll let you know something soon. You know, we are under the auspices of a blackout period prior to an election, and so, you know, we're hopeful that we can get things done before that, but we'll see, okay? Thank you so much. It's been a great day. I enjoyed being with you.
It's been an honor to be with all of you. Thank you very much, and thank you for caring about the students of your community. I really, really am proud to be a part of this process, so
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.